Yes. Sure, sure, sure. I know, I remember. I remember there hasn't been any coordination or any cancellation decision. So right now,
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
I know.
Thank you very much for coming, and I'd like to apologize that we started, or we are starting a little late. However, we promise that we are going to keep time. And welcome to the Mingle 2025. This is hosted here in the City by WSA, International Coordinator. And I believe that you're all excited to be here to get engaged in informative and exciting conversation that we are hoping to have on the theme, the power of African narratives in shaping identity and creativity. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to move straight to introducing our panelists, and then I will start with our moderator. Our moderator is Anthony Penbos Onuba. He comes from Nigeria, and he is the founder of Writerspace Africa, the creator of African Writers Conference and African Writers Awards, and he spent many years turning literary dreams into real spaces where African voices rise, connect, and conquer. He's not just the writer of 8 books, spanning from poetry, prose, drama, and children's stories, but he is a builder of legends, literary legends and legacies, a man who saw what African literature could become and decided to happen. This is who we have here today as our moderator. And then I'd like to move on to the first panelist sitting right next to him. That is Laone Mama. That's it, right? Oh, thank you so much. And he comes from Botswana. He's a self-published author, a poet, and a creative who has been featured in the Galahari Review, the IBUA Journal, and Love Made in Africa Anthology. And he brings his honesty in every line, pulling them out from the soul with both hands. I would like to move from him. Okay, let me not do that. But then just next to him we have our very own coming from the Mountain Kingdom, And he is a writer, an entrepreneur, and a youth mentor using creativity to teach strategy, confidence, and self-expression. Rapoya is also a co-founder of Fact and Rex Soul Stories Publishing House. He helps emerging authors turn their ideas into impact from ghostwriting to editing, as well as publishing and book launches. On the stage, we hear that he is a chess coach at Basa Sport, teaching children that thinking ahead in life, all on the board, always allows or leads to better moves. And then next to him, we have politics, history, culture, and African politics, history, culture, and African consciousness. He's a graduate of Imo State University, who graduated in first class honors in philosophy, political urban. He's also a graduate from the Political Urban University in Rome and the University of Westminster in London. Brandon's academic journey bridges the classical and the contemporary world. He is a publisher or a published author rather of multiple philosophical work, including Politics and History, which is a global discourse, and the philosophical knowledge as perspectivism, with his research work spanning ethics, post-colonialism, and African socio-political thought. And then next to Brandon, we have Leo Musigorena, right? Okay. Thank God I managed to do that. I had to rehearse all the way in order to get that one right. So Leo comes from Zimbabwe, and he is a cultural journalist, an editor, a communication strategist, redefining how Southern Africa tells its stories. As the managing editor at the Southern Africa Times, Leo curates powerful narratives that explore African art, culture, and identity, giving space to the voices shaping tomorrow's cultural landscape. And from chronicling creative resistance to capturing the pulse of emerging artists, Leo's storytelling bridges the continent's past, the present, and the future. And his work reminds us that writing isn't just an art, but an agency. And then next to me, I have Mimi Machagairi. It's okay, right? Yeah. Thank you so much. And she's also from Zimbabwe. She is a storyteller who turned curiosity into a career and passion into power. So from writing for South African news outlets at the age of 21 to shaping Lesotho's creative sense, Mimi's pen carries both grit and grace. Her books, The Land of Kwalabes and Other Stories, and the Mental Health for Creatives, are love letters to exploration of healing. Through them, she opens doors for conversations too often left unspoken. And she has walked through newsrooms, ad agencies, and publishing houses, but her truest home has always been the page. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to hand over to our very own moderator for today and our very own founder, the man behind this whole event today, the mind rather behind this whole event today. And I hope you will gain a lot of information and knowledge from the theme and the interactions, the conversations that we are going to have today. Thank you.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to our host for that wonderful introduction. But before we start, and welcome to the panelists. Before we start, I'll just give you a brief history of why we do the Writers' Week. Usually, with a conference, because it's a large event, it's a lot of authors coming in and all. We felt we should have a something like a pre-conference event where we could have a gathering of 20 people or less with the visiting writers from different countries. So they can sit down with every other person and share ideas, and interact and mingle. The idea is to mingle for networking. Because at the larger conference, once it's over, a lot of people are rushing either to catch their flight back or for another engagement. And there really isn't much time. So the mingle usually is 90 minutes, not longer. We ask just 3 questions, only 3 questions from me anyway. You are free to interject at any time. You are free to add, to subtract, to divide, whatever it is you want to do. And after that, then you can now ask your questions towards when it's time for us to wrap up. Then after we wrap up, of course, our host to give the vote of thanks, and then we can begin to make. So that's just it. I mean, it's like I said, people as ABC, right? So, like you've heard from the introductions, they are from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, especially. And it rhymes with our theme because the theme is the power of African narratives in shaping identity and culture. And all of you that agree with me that has been an issue that has been, in the front burner of African literature for a very long time. So what I want us to start this with, you've already read a lot of African books, emphasis on African books. I mean, you can use anyone as an example, but can you tell us how these writers have been able to shape your understanding of identity and culture, or identity or culture, from any of the books you've read? You can start randomly. Don't be afraid. Anybody can speak at any time.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. for this question. For me, if I would say there are a lot of influence. And when I mean influence, I mean very impactful influence, portraying African values, portraying African cultures, and then exploring identity, and then also justifying the African. Most works when he cited Bill for one of his publications in Things Fall Apart. I could remember Achebe in one of his works, he criticized the foreign writer, what's his name, the author of Heart of Darkness, John Conrad, portraying the value and then the ethical principle of an African man, where he made emphasis on the quality of Igbo culture. Igbo culture, where he try to reconcile identity, he tried to appreciate culture, he tried to harness how the African culture has not just impacted the African man, but have also exercised the inherited worldviews of the foreigners. In Achebe's work, not just Achebe, Lechamadi, there are so many of them, African writers. They try to elevate the culture of an African man, regardless of the influence of the colonial masters. We have a tradition, we have ethics we portray, and this thing has gone so much influence. You cannot compare today the training of a well-groomed African child to someone who was trained in Europe culture. The gap is very, very high. Can you talk of discipline? You come to Europe, I live in the European world. For a child to greet you is very difficult. You see a child of 10 years, 14 years asking someone who is enough to give him birth or can even be his grandfather very early in the morning, how will you do it? In Africa, Chinua Achebe and some African writers, Gugi Watiogu and Solo, a lot of them, they made sure that they groomed the African child, they groomed us in a portraying some literature that this is whom we are. We value identity, we value ethics. And if you could remember, if any of you have read, if you are conversant with the Akan people of Ghana, Akan talks about African ethics. When you talk about the African ethics, it's a very broad issue of philosophy. Akan people, even before the white man came, even before there was stipulated rules of customs and tradition, an average Akan knows his ethics, he knows his norms, and then he knows his culture. In summary, I am here to say that the African writers or African literature has gone a long way, not just in reshaping an average African, but creating an ethical standard consciousness that guides us and then promotes the unity and then promotes our representation and through Africa portraying our cultural values. Thank you so much.
I remember I'm actually surprised that you mentioned Chinua Achebe because I was reading about him earlier as we were making our way here. He said, if you don't like a story, you need to write your own. So at the end of the day, he was critiquing John Conrad's perception of people whom he saw when he visited a place where they were already living harmoniously. So when we speak of globalization, for example, we talk about having to catch up in terms of language, in terms of culture. And the thing that suffers most is our own language, it is our own culture. So I'm glad I'm seated in front of writers, and I would like to encourage each and every one of us to try, if possible, to write in the vernacular so that at least we leave a legacy to the next generation, because that generation is in trouble. We are trying to say newsrooms across the world, they are giving the narrative that Africa is in perpetual crisis, always. So that narrative, Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace, but we have justice and peace in our own way. We are now, I was, a few years ago, I was a teacher at a girls' high school. It was a really tough situation for me because I could not reprimand the child unless they would say, these are my rights. I have my right to express myself, even if it's in a rude manner. So I'm saying, if we can try to shift that narrative so that we have resilience, creativity, and a respect as a people of Africa, that way we will leave a strong legacy for generations to come. Thank you.
On your point on writing in vernacular for the next generation, I'd like to say I'm actually a part of that generation that was very endangered in losing its identity and national pride. But I was lucky enough to have enjoyed one single short story in high school that was written by a local author from the books of either Monata Limakwa. Actually, not one. There's actually quite a lot of them. There's Monata Limakwa and Lobadilo. That's one of the books that I really enjoyed back in high school. And the reason why I enjoyed this is because I had no idea that where I come from and where I live and what supposedly my culture and identity, there was this much fun in literature because all I've ever consumed was Western media through TV, through radio, through a lot of things. And because of that, I'd like to thank our parents, at least mine. I don't even think they did this on purpose or like with bad intentions, but our the emphasis was on me learning English and being good at it. There was no look back on who you are, reflect on that, take that identity, be proud of it, right? So those books made me realize that before looking outside, looking for the world beyond, to really say find identity, it's right here. I don't need to go anywhere. It's right here where I'm at, where I am, right? So those books really helped me a lot. Now, another experience that really helped me was I'm currently in the National University of Lesotho right now, and I'm studying a course called Spiritual Care and Counseling, right? So it encompasses, or rather, it has a lot of cultural background, uh, say spiritual religious background, right? And all of those are African being compared to, say, the big five of religions and all that. African spirituality is involved compared to Christianity and Judaism and all of those, right? So all of this made me realize just how much I was born into a world that was already favoring Western media and making me as a young writer and a young person to think everything that's not us is better. So in that regard, I understand, or rather, I fully support you in writing in our own vernacular, but trying by all means to make our, or rather, the generations, my generation and a generation after them, the one after that, to sort of like find pride in our identity and national pride in who we are, and shamelessly try to promote that because I found that most of the people my age are actually very, very ashamed of of expressing who we are to other people or to even speak in Sesotho. Personally, I wish I knew more Sesotho than I already do. This actually shames me. I feel like I've been robbed of who I am because the emphasis on be good at English, be good at this, be good at that, but there was no, this is who you are, this is where you start, so that you don't get lost as to where you're going, you need to know where you come from. So those books, I don't know how they did it, but they made me realize there's where I come from and where I'm going. And where I'm going, I'm going to get lost if I don't know where I'm going. So they did help me stop looking forward and start looking back. I'm like, who actually am I? So that's where even started trying, or rather, I started writing books based on social culture and lore and identity as a way to sort of like reflect and make other kids interested in who we are. So yeah, that's
I think that I can add on to his last point that a lot of my influence has been on fiction storytelling from the European concept, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, those have been my attraction to a lot of the books. And if I were to name an African author who has influenced me, I would be lying because I don't even remember a lot of them besides the ones that I've just gotten to know now as an adult. Because at school, I think there was only like one Shona author that we were all taught, and we didn't even have access to a lot of like books that were taught in Shona or Ndebele or other languages. Like I would ask my peers as we got older, how did you learn Shona? And they actually learned it from their friends, or they would make an effort to find books everywhere else in town or around the country, and it was a lot of self-taught lessons that they did on their own time. But the schools, they didn't really encourage a lot for us to actually explore some of these other areas. So it needed for you to actually feel an interest to go out into the world and find a lot of these books for yourself. And I think that it's time now that we start pushing this to the younger kids so that they don't feel like the European novels or the stories are more important than actually them learning from where they come from. Because we identify a lot of ourselves in reading. Like even the way we call our ancestors, the way we call our parents, the way we understand how certain like
how do I even approach my grandma? How do I approach my uncle from my father's side? We have to be able to learn that through storytelling and maybe find a creative way of teaching it. And I don't know, but I think it's high time we change the narrative and actually go harder, telling our own stories and not allowing other people to tell the stories that where we come from for us. We actually have to be the ones to tell our own African stories and not allow other people to come in and say who Africans are or who we are as Africans.
Okay. All right. So for me, I think what has fascinated me the most is Pan-Africanism. The concept of Pan-Africanism for me came through Black American literature, right? So I used to read books such as The Soul of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. I used to read a lot about Marcus Garvey and then that's how they opened the portal to literature that was in Africa. So these texts they influenced a lot of my thinking, and then I was quite angry at the time. I was quite angry about what was happening on the continent, and to the point where I think it wasn't beneficial. You get me? In the terms of my expression, so it wasn't authentic. I was inheriting, anger from previous people that had nothing to do with me, sort of. So I had to bring it back to Botswana, to the continent of Africa, and see really how everything connects to me and stuff like that. So I started reading literature such as Akai Toda by Dr. Lame Pusetso. She's a Botswana writer, and then it was written in her native language of Sekhalakaj, but then because she was using a publisher, they translated it into English. So from there, I started falling in love with expressing myself in native languages. So ke Motswana, ke bua Setswana, and therefore I also found out that not a lot of children or youth my age use Setswana, or they don't think it's cool really, right? They don't feel it's cool to express themselves in Setswana. So as I was doing my spoken word now, I started incorporating Setswana into my spoken word. So before I continue, I always start with a piece in Setswana and then continuing with English, contemporary English, and stuff like that. So, I mean, in high school we read books like Things Fall Apart as well, but I wouldn't say they were at the time they were as much an influence as they as they should have been, but changed, and I through my work and my pen, right, I am trying more and more to highlight the beauty of our culture, which is Setswana culture, with the writing and the spoken word, because it's a beautiful culture, and really it's an ancient culture that like other African cultures, it's an oral tradition, right? And hearing the elders talk about all these mythologies and these folklore is heartwarming, and it is up to us. I believe it is up to us writers to take that now and then put it down into paper, but in contemporary means. How we are going to do that, it's really up to us. Yeah, but we need to find a way. It's an issue of utmost importance, right? If we are going to survive, if our culture is going to survive, then we need to make sure that we incorporate these things into our expression. Yeah, it's an urgency. So yeah.
So my next question, I'll direct it specifically to Leo and Brendan. For reasons, I mean, Leo is a journalist, Brendan is a researcher. The point is, can you give us a picture of where we went wrong? Because at some point we had colonial, post-colonial picture, it was everywhere. Currently, I mean, you could go to bookstores, libraries, you hardly see any of these books anymore. There was a time also that when schools were having their speech and prize giving day, you have cultural dance, those kind of things. But a lot of them gone. So, what do you think? At what point? And I know you've seen it a lot in the literature, but at what point can you tell us at this point?
Okay. I'll give a personal perspective, or should I call it experience? Like my Lesotho brother here alluded to earlier, our parents, in a bid to improve our lives and make them a notch above theirs, they took us to schools whose curriculum sort of shifted away from what they were supposed to. I'm Shona from Zimbabwe. My surname translates to he who knows how to speak. However, the spoken Shona and the written Shona that I can read and write right now is up to grade 7. Because the high school that I went to said all the bright students, they're going to do French instead. I haven't used French in my adult life. I haven't traveled to France yet. I don't think I would want, maybe when my better half says, let's go to Paris. But personally, I wouldn't want to. I'm saying this to say that is where we went from. I've been an educator before. The language of instruction is now English. Why? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. If we can say maths textbooks, science textbooks are now available in local languages, I'll tell you, we have a lot more engineers coming out of Africa because the level of explanation in your vernacular is different because the teacher might also be struggling to articulate, to impart the knowledge that he might have to the student. Because in teaching, there is what they call assumed knowledge. In a classroom full of students, we are assuming because we are at this grade, this knowledge is common when it's not. So if something is explained or translated into a local language, the levels when or if I become the president, I'll have a translator because I'll be talking to them in Shona at the UN summit. That is what should be done. If we are going to say maths textbook in Yoruba, then the students from the Yoruba tribe will flourish because they would now have an understanding. I have a 3-year-old nephew. The only Shona word that he knows is honey, let's go, because he doesn't want to be left behind by the car. Other than that, we have to communicate with him in English. That, my fellow writers, is where we are going wrong. Because a lot of parents, young parents especially, they are talking to their children in English. Why are we going? That is where we are going wrong. If we can take pride in our languages and local languages, then we will be in a better position.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay.
To further explore, in fact, he has almost said everything. And I want to tell you, from my experience as a researcher and as a writer, I mean, if I should mention where we got it wrong, this is the basic question. We got it wrong almost all over the place. And then the first thing I want to emphasize on is the burden of inherited worldviews. The burden of inherited worldviews, which comes from the foreigners. I've had the experience of teaching in schools and then tertiary institutions. Even before I left my country to United Kingdom. And even there in Europe, I was a part-time teacher when I was doing my master's program. Now, when you talk about culture, we give accreditation to the foreigners, forgetting that even in the field of science, the African man practiced science, the first of it all. The quality of African science cannot be undermined. Let's think about it. Most of us have cultures, most of us have traditions, and within those times, if you are doing cultural festival, we have masquerade display, we have breaking of kola nuts, we have coronation of some titles. Some participations you see either through masquerading or a display made by some of the masquerade. They think such initiative there is like people sitting down to create something very unique to entice the populace. It's not a day initiative. If actually there is no value in all these things, why are the Western world interested in African culture? You go to Paris, some of our artworks are there. Ibuku art culture, Benin arts, and every other thing. We got it wrong because we feel the priority, which I call a camouflage. These people are always better than us. It's just a misdirection. And then that was why my last publication on research was reconciling the African consciousness. And then this was a resuscitation or resurrecting from the burden of inherited worldviews. We talk of language. The average African parent can't make a genuine effort to educate his or her child on his own native language or culture. And then you ask yourself question, who is fooling who? Yes, I will not also not undermine the effort of some people, because if you come to Western world, you come to a certain family and you see that all the children speak their native language. There are some parents who really understand the core values and then the identity of the African man. And I'll keep making this sample moderate. Some years in the past, a foreigner, popularly known as Mingle, came to Nigeria. And then Nigerians took him to River Niger, a place known as River Niger. And then he saw River Niger, explored it, took him up reading and everything. Then came out from the river, and then they now told us that the person that discovered the sails to River Niger is Mingle Park. Why he was taken there. Till today, Nigerian current affairs, they ask you question who discovered River Niger. They say it's Mingle Park. If you write anything else, you fail it. Are they evil spirits that took him to the riverside? So, is earlier we start coming out from this burden of inherited worldviews. I could remember back then when we were growing up as children or as kids or whatever. There's always this masquerade in my place they call the Wonder Masquerade. It's more like a piece of clothes on the floor, and then they beat drums for it. It will be growing, elevating in height. That's African science. Even if you want to talk about philosophy, ethics is a very important aspect of philosophy. But I want to tell you that a genuine accreditation to ethics or philosophy of ethics is genuinely or has its original inheritance from the Ekan people of Ghana. You can make more research about this. The white man might not tell you this. Africans have culture, Africans have value, but we are derailing. We are carried away. It's just more like there's always this popular definition that when you talk about the dangers of the crowds, a book written by a popular writer used to so is now in Vietnam from Nigeria. Titled The Dangers of the Crowd. The crowd has no identity. And that is one of the challenges. It's in not just it's a deep-rooted challenge facing the average Africans. You come, you hear something, you follow it up, you believe it, you start practicing it. No research, no patience, no further evaluation on the process. In the past years, Africans almost had everything. And that was why our colonial masters saw reasons to keep on trooping in and out. One doesn't point hand where he sees nothing. So the African creatives to actually do our possible best. I want to tell you my experience when I went to teach introduction to physics at Brent's High School, London. It was a class preparing for their SSC exam. And then they were talking of surface tension. And then I came in, I asked them what were the previous classes you had. Then can any of you give me just a practical analysis of what surface tension is? And then we are all done. But this same surface tension we are talking about in physics, it was an African that made a practical experiment of getting a bowl of water and then bringing a detergent. This is the water. This is the substance. Touch this water. How do you feel it? It's hard. This was an experiment carried out by school children. If you touch this bowl of water, they said it's hard. Okay, add some substance of detergent on this water. Fill it again. They gave response. This is still hard. This is soft. What is surface tension? What is surface tension more than giving them this practical experiment? The level of hardness and softness of liquid. But they will not tell us this. So I won't go more about it, but that's why till I leave this planet, my research must always be based on reconciling the African consciousness, culture, identity, and then resuscitating the drilling mind to where we got it wrong. We got it wrong in language, we got it wrong in word, we got it wrong in practices and core values of an African man. And let's all hands be on desk to create a society where people will see more reasons to value what we have and then resuscitate what we've lost to make a greater nation. Thank you so much.
Now you talk about consciousness, so I'm going to shift now to you because I know you've done a lot of work in mental health.
Yes.
There are lots of people who are of the opinion that our issues are psychological. When the black man, well, the African, has there's something going on, there's something up there that isn't normal. What do you think?
I think that while to some extent it might be psychological, yes, it is psychological, but it's more of something that is internal. What you think for yourself, yes, it's going to affect your overall, the way you carry yourself overall. Because there are ways on how you can cope with a lot of these things that we overthink about. But at times, either it's lack of knowledge on how to deal with it, or we understand, yes, but we don't practice it enough. And while we tend to say like, yes, I know about this and I know how I'm feeling, some of us we are also in denial of a lot of these feelings at the same time. So it needs for us to do a lot of self-exploration to figure out where do we stand and how do we actually improve as a person. And going forward, how do I also identify other ways that I can communicate a lot of these internal things that are happening? Because it needs for a conversation to happen between yourself, and a professional to also help you identify what are some of the challenges that you might be going through on an everyday basis. For you to then be able to answer that question for yourself, that is it all in my head or is it something that I actually have been living with for this time? And from there, that's when you can try to solve a lot of these problems that you might be facing. Because people, they forget that, okay, while you can convince yourself of something, it may or may not be true. And if it is true, how do I move forward? How do I live on an everyday basis knowing this information that I have?
Okay. So both of you, I want you to answer the same question, this and the previous. And then after that, we'll just take one round sweep of everybody, final words before hand over to the hosts who hands over who opens the yeah. So,
Okay. Okay. So I think where we were going. I want to credit that primarily to entertainment. Entertainment, I'd like to believe, is a medium which